My name is Abhay, and actually my presence here is a little, it's a little weird because I'm not a developer, I'm not a programmer. Actually, I'm on the other side of things. Me and my company, we end up most of the time breaking programs. We are information security people, so our primary job is to kind of make sure that whatever we find, we break. So it's a little strange for me to be talking to developers from time to time, but I do this, but I'm just talking about it from time to time. It's a little weird. So I'm just going to give you a brief introduction about what I'm going to talk about. The module I'm going to be talking to you about is something that came out of necessity for us. I will explain that necessity as the talk progresses. And the necessity became very important. I mean, in the sense that when we were doing tests, when we were doing security tests, this thing would help us immensely in doing it more efficiently, more effectively, and more comprehensively. So let me just talk to you about what it is that I'm talking about. Has anyone in this room heard of something called port scanning? Okay, lots of you have heard of port scanning. Port scanning is a very common practice. So this is, the talk today is going to be essentially a little bit about port scanning and a little bit about how Python has made my life infinitely easier in port scanning using certain libraries that I'm going to be showing you. So let me just give you a brief introduction about myself. My name is Abhay, and I am the CTO of a company called V45 Solutions. Now we are into information security out and out. We only break stuff, we don't make stuff. What I do is, I've also written a bunch of books. I've written 2 books on Java security. I was purely in the Java space till 3 months ago when I realized that my love was somewhere else, and I started writing Python code, and it's been amazing so far. I've also written another book on payment card industry compliance, which is for it's another security specific topic for payment card industry. I also, my company, like I said, we only do information security work, and also we do workshops and training and stuff like that. So, just to give people who are not familiar with what a port scan is, there's some information about a port scan. Now, a port scan is usually one of the starting points of what you would call an ethical hacking test or a penetration test. Okay? Now, when I want to understand what your machine is all, what the target is all about, I need to understand what services are running on this target. I need to understand what ports are open, what services are running, what is the actual version of the service running behind this particular service. So for instance, if it's port 80, all of us assume that it is HTTP. It can be some other port as well, but usually a port 80 would mean it's HTTP. Port 8080 means it could be an Apache Tomcat service. Port 3306 usually means it is a MySQL database. 1433 means it is a MS SQL server sitting behind that particular service. So every server or every target has a bunch of ports open that it requires for it to do its job. Sometimes what happens, oftentimes, not sometimes, is that administrators get really lazy and they leave all ports open, or a truckload of ports open that don't really need to be open. Oftentimes that's what happens because people don't understand the concept of hardening, or a company is not very initiated in the world of security. So their management hire somebody like us, and we are required to see and explore and probably penetrate their environment, try and break into their systems, break into their apps. We do this all the time. Now, port scan is an initial step. I never start my security test without a port scan. I have to do it. Simple reason is that a port scan tells me what my target looks like. It's a reconnaissance. All of us have seen action movies, right? In action movies, especially where there is the army involved, they say, let's go on recon mode or something like that. That is essentially what this is. In reconnaissance, you need to understand what your target is. Is it a mail server? Is it a web server? Is it some kind of middleware server? Or is it some kind of, an ICQ server or a chat server? What kind of a server is it? What kind of a device? What kind of a target? Is it a desktop? What kind of a device is sitting behind this? So a port scan is essentially very useful for us to identify what kind of a system it is. So the port scan essentially is supposed to tell us which are the open, closed or filtered ports in a system. Now some ports are open. Obviously, let us say I have a web server, I need it to speak to everybody in the world. So my port 80 on the web server would be open. But not necessarily some other ports. It may not necessarily require me to have 3306 open on the same server. Probably it's a bad practice if I have my database accessible from the outside world, which perhaps is a bad practice. So some ports are required, some ports are not. Sometimes you will have firewalls filtering out certain ports. Like for instance, let us say a web server is configured with a database server inbuilt and you have 3306 open to the inside interface but closed from the internet. It's possible. So it may be filtered or closed based on a different interface. So we identify port scans. Port scans are an essential part of my life. Now, from the past 3 or 4 months, I've been writing a lot of scripts, not really apps, like you guys might be doing in Python, and I have genuinely loved my experience in it, because earlier I used to write a lot of code in Java, and you understand that Java, it takes 10 times more time, effort, debugging, all of that stuff, and it was becoming really painful, because if I had to do something quick, it would never happen. Let us say, because our time at a client's place is very limited. Let us say I'm testing a client. I usually have about 7 to 10 days to do it. I don't have all the time in the world. And in this time, if I have to write some specific thing to do something very specific on the client's target, I really don't have the time. So I need to be able to move really fast. So what I love about Python, of course, is the speed at which you can write code. All of you, I'm sure, know this. All of you appreciate it. That's why you're all here. The data structures are amazing. The possibility where obviously it's dynamic, so the data structures are also dynamic, and recursive data structures. The object orientation is pretty simple. And the best thing that I personally love about Python is that there are great security libraries and modules available. There is a lot of work that people in the security industry are constantly doing with Python. They're building things like, a great network tool is Scapy. Scapy, anyone heard of Scapy? Obviously. Scapy is a great network tool that you use, or you can manipulate for network security testing. You can use that to packet craft. You can do a lot of stuff. It's very, very multifunctional. You have DNS Python that you can use for DNS queries, recursive queries. You can use it for zone transfers and stuff like that. You have Scrappy, which is the scraping. When we do web application security testing, one of the things we do as part of that thing is we scrape web pages, or we recursively try and identify certain pages or certain folders, and it becomes much easier when we use these kind of modules that are already there. So the module that I'm going to be talking about is based on the world's most popular port scan. How many of you have heard of Nmap? Okay, a lot of people have heard of Nmap. Nmap is the world's most popular, most versatile port scanning tool. It's become more than just a port scanner today. Nmap started off as a simple tool which you can use to talk to ports and see whether they're open. Multiple options were there. You can run evasive queries. For instance, let us say you feel that the firewall is blocking a particular target. You can try some kind of evasive queries or some kind of ARP poisoning queries and all that kind of stuff, and you can actually get access to your target. Nmap has become, like I said, much more than a port scanner. It has become almost like a vulnerability assessment tool. In fact, you have something called NSE scripts, which are all Lua scripts. What they are is that it can actually check for vulnerabilities on common platforms. For instance, you see my last query, the Nmap-P1433 script MS SQL empty password. Now what this does, it queries port 1433, which is commonly a Microsoft SQL Server port, and it checks for an empty password. If it finds it, it comes back with a yes. So it has become extremely versatile, and I use this extensively in most of our tests, in all our tests. And this is an essential tool for any security tester. You can ask anybody who's in security, perhaps even remotely in security, he'll know about Nmap, because Nmap is, it's an essential tool. Now, when I wanted to start writing a tool for Nmap, I thought of using it from the command line, because Nmap didn't have any Python-specific API. So, obviously the route you do about it is called the command line argument using sub-process or something like that. And I tried doing that. Of course, it was fine, but it didn't give me the flexibility that I wanted in terms of asynchronous and callbacks and all of that stuff. So when I looked around a little bit, I found Python's Nmap, which somebody's put it, I don't know the developer's name, but it's available. Just type Python Nmap and you get this up. And Python Nmap is really good in the sense that it saves me a lot of time in doing what I do in terms of port scanning. And what it actually does, it provides a very simple interface. It provides a lot of simple method or function calls that you can do in order to get your results, pass through your results. The results are in a dictionary format, so it's pretty easy to pass those results as well. So, and again, interface is super powerful, and it's not great, it's not extremely well documented, but it has the essentials in there. So, if anyone is using some kind of a network, something relating to port scanning in their projects or whatever, this would be a great library because it incorporates, Nmap is still Nmap, it still lies at the bottom, but this talks to it in a way that is very seamless and quite simple. Now, one of the common things that happens in our tests is that, again, like I said, we need to port scan, and when we do port scanning, how many of you have noticed this trend that is happening in companies or in our systems in general? Most systems run a web server. How many of you have seen this? I've seen companies where they're running web servers across everybody's system. Desktops, laptops, servers, it doesn't matter. Everything is running a web server. Sometimes servers are running 5-6 web servers, which most of the administrators don't really know about. Okay? Now, this is a disconcerting trend because what happens is, since you have a web server which is probably not patched, you don't even know about it, it's probably vulnerable, and an attacker can gain access and get access to the jewels, so to speak. So, what we've been seeing is that we need to, our team and I, we realized that we need to identify as many possible non-standard web server ports as well when we were doing our tests. And the problem with Nmap was obviously Nmap, you run a test, it will tell you which ports are open, but it will not tell you exactly whether there's a web server behind it. Yes, you could do a little more analysis and find out, but it takes time. It's a time-consuming affair. When you're short of time, let us say I have to test an environment with 1,000 desktops. If I have to test 1,000 desktops, I'm constantly short of time. If I'm constantly short of time, 1,000 desktops, maybe 50 servers. I am short of time because I have to do other things apart from just port scan. Port scan is just one thing that I need to do. So what I did, I came up with a small tool. What it would do, the tool, was that it would run Nmap, and once it ran Nmap, it would give me the results on screen and also open up a web browser with all the ports that are open. So as soon as Nmap told me which ports were open, it would open up a browser and it would just open it up on the browser to show me which ports are potentially open. So today I'm just going to show you an example of that. I'll also take you through some of the code, and I just put it up on my blog if anyone wants to download it and use it for that. I must warn you, please don't port scan targets that are not authorized to test. You could be in trouble for that, either within your company, outside your company. You have to have authorization before you test. This is, security is serious stuff, so you need to be a little careful about what you do. So, Python Nmap is pretty simple. You just import the Nmap module, and it has something called a port scanner. So you just call the port scanner, and once you do that, you can use the .scan function, and you can start scanning your target. Now the beautiful thing about this is that you don't have to scan only one target. When you say host, you can give an entire range, and you get results with an entire range of IP addresses that you have scanned. So here you can see my example, 192.168.1.0 to 255. It scans the entire subnet, right? I can give arguments like any command line program, but Nmap has arguments. Those arguments do a lot of things. In fact, some of my scan arguments run into almost 2 lines because if you want to get it really granular and perfect, you run these scan arguments at a very, very detailed level. So you can do that as well. Just specify the arguments in your arguments keyword, And what it returns is it returns something called the, you can query the all hosts function. Once it finishes the scanning process, it returns the all host method, and you can pass through the all host method, all host function, what the variable returned, and then you can, you can pass it and display it or whatever you want to do, you can do with it. It also has an asynchronous port scanner, which has a callback return function where you can do a lot of other things. You can have multiple activities happening once as this particular scanner is running, because sometimes what happens is when a port scan is running, it takes a lot of time. I'm going to show you a demonstration today which is on, I'm going to port scan my local host, so it's going to take less time. But if you're actually scanning an environment, and if you want to do a good job of it, it takes a while, right? So, let me just take you through. So, like I said, my problem was this. How do I enumerate all possible non-standard and standard web servers or web-facing services on a target system? So, enumerate quickly, I came up with a simple solution. The modules that I've used here are essentially the Nmap module, which I'm going to talk about. I've also used an amazing command lines option parser called docopt. How many of you have used docopt or heard of docopt? Docopt is it's one of the most elegant solutions I've seen for command line argument passing. I'll show it. It's just a single line of code really. It's just amazing. It's versus the arg parse and the opt parse. This is a much more elegant and simplified solution that gives you a lot more flexibility to design your own command line piece. I've also used something called the web browser module. The web browser module is again a built-in module in Python where it will call the browser function. So the simplest thing, I've used it for its simplest use case, which is the get. If I do the get, it opens up my browser and gets whatever site I wanted to get. I've used that alone in this particular example. So let me take you through the code. Yeah, so what you can see here is that I've given a description of how to run the tool. Usage, you provide a host, you can provide a host or hosts. Like I said, it can run multiple hosts at a time. And you can also provide the arguments, that is the Nmap arguments. Whatever Nmap specific arguments you want, you can provide. It also has a help screen. Now the beautiful thing about docopt, which I'm going to show you now, is all docopt needs to pass your command line arguments is this. That's it. So all I'm going to pass my command line arguments is actually just this. Yeah, you can see this line. So what docopt does is it understands automatically, it passes my usage instructions in the options, and it figures out what to do with what. So you can see here, I have the host argument, a variable called hnames has been assigned to it. The nargs has been assigned to the narg argument that I've given it, and the tool runs based on that. Now, let me just show you some of the code. Yeah, so what I've done is I've opened up the port scanner, and the port scanner, if it has an argument, it's going to take something, but if it doesn't, please excuse the coding style and all of that stuff. This is just a test script that I've worked on. So what I've done is once the scan finishes its scan, I've written a for loop where I get the host and the state of the host, and then I get into the protocols because I want to examine what protocols. On the TCP protocol, what ports are open. On UDP, what ports are open. I have the flexibility of doing both because on Nmap you can run a UDP scan as well as a TCP scan, so you can run both. And once it identifies all the protocols and the ports that are open, it prints it out on screen for me to see. And what it does, it also passes it to the open browser. Now open browser is a method, it's a function that I've called where I have pass that particular dictionary object into the open browser, and it said every time it finds the host and the port, it opens up a browser window for me to check if there are any non-standard ports running on HTTP. And the results are actually very surprising to me because last week I used the same script and we were running a test in a large client's facility. And on his server, which was supposed to be for, an SAP server, it also had something like 3 web servers running on multiple ports, and he didn't even know about it. So the good thing was that we discovered this very quickly, and it didn't take us too much of effort in trying to get this together because it was a simple and straightforward solution for us to use right off the bat. So let me tell you how the tool works. One second. Yeah, so I'm going to run it with sudo because Nmap requires sudo for certain kind of scans to be performed. I'm going to run it with some arguments that require sudo. So SV is essentially what it's going to do is it's going to identify the service that is running behind the port. SV is is a flag for that. O is an operating system detection flag. It tries to do an operating system detection. Sometimes because you're behind a firewall, it becomes difficult to detect whether it's this kind of a Linux or this kind of a Windows, what kind. It does a guesswork as well. So Nmap is pretty versatile that way. So I'll just run the tool. So this is going to take some time, but the thing is what this is supposed to do now, it is going to run Nmap against my local host, which is evident with the target H there, and it's also passed through arguments for Nmap. Now this will display the results on screen as well as open up browser ports. Now on my system, there is a MySQL instance running. There is also a Django project that I've written which is running on port 8000, so that should show up. So let's just, and there might be some other non-standard ports that may be running instances of, or running web services that we don't know of. So we can just have a look. Now basically why this has helped me so much is not just because of Nmap, because of Python's integration capabilities with Nmap, because you can have multiple modules and multiple libraries talk to it, you can make a lot of meaningful information, you can perhaps do better in terms of reporting with these kind of libraries. It has helped us a great deal. Of course, this is just a starting point, and the great thing that I discovered through this process was doc-opt. Like you said, like you saw, doc-opt, the easiest thing was just to write the usage pattern for the tool, and doc-opt did everything else. All you had to do was pass get the right arguments and do whatever you wanted with those arguments. So you can write even the most complicated command line interfaces with almost zero coding. It becomes a very, very simple thing, as opposed to trying to figure out, which is a positional argument and when should this come, when should that come, when should I pass this, what should the exception state be, all of that stuff. And it also gives you, when you say in the usage pattern to use an H, it automatically gives you that screen again. It gives you the help screen again for that particular tool. Just give me a minute or so, I think it should come up soon. Yeah.
Why do people launch a browser to check if it's a web server? Use a HTTP library, library that doesn't launch a browser. Would that serve your purpose, or do you specifically need a browser?
Not necessary. In this case, we decided to go with it because it's visual. It's immediate. We get to see, what's on it or what's not. Of course, the use cases could be altered in whichever way you would like. Absolutely right. You could write something like a wget equivalent, and it could do your work for you. Absolutely. But in this case, what we decided to do was because we wanted to get an immediate understanding. And many times, when we find, for instance, you can see this is just launching a bunch of. Oops. So you can see here that this is the tool we actually put on Django. It has found that particular port. It's also found the 3306, and it has also found that the CUPS web interface has been disabled. So our objective of this, like I said, is just to get a visual impact. And once we identify that particular service, we could probably go about testing it immediately. So that is another reason why we came up with it. But of course, like you rightly said, it can be used for multiple other things as well. So you can see my command line results as well. Yeah, you can see this. It's found these many open ports on my localhost system, and it has shown me that, and it has port 8000 identified as HTTP. It has not identified the specific nature because I have not gone into the depth of scanning that I would have, but MySQL has identified IPP. See, Nmap sometimes identifies based on the generic nature of the port. It does not just, for instance, 1025 is a very common port that it identifies. 1025 is for the Microsoft blackjack game. However, 1025 is used actually in many different ways across. But when you run an Nmap, it goes by the most generic description of the port, which is blackjack. So sometimes there are changes, but what this tool essentially is supposed to do is to help you identify the environment much better. And also, in our case, we have modified, we have created a small Python script that helps us identify standard and non-standard web browser ports on our target system. So with that, I'd like to thank you. Just to inform you, we're also doing a workshop on July 24th and 25th on application security. So if you're interested, just ping me after the program. Thank you, and I hope it was interesting. Any questions? I'll be happy to take.
Blog you have on this website? You said you.
Yeah, that's my site. Abhay.com. It's on that site. Yeah, it also does a version identification. It also tries to do an aggressive version identification. Also tries to do an operating system identification. For it doesn't matter which the target system is. I agree the sockets would be much faster because it's in the local host. But the thing is, it tries to do a version identification, also an operating system identification. So it takes some time as a result. So if you have to do more, for instance, let us say I did a trace route, which is unnecessary in this case, because I'm sitting on the local system and I'm just making a TCP socket connection to my own local system. But if you do a trace route, it would take even more time because it would actually do hops and then figure out how many hops is between each of it and then come back to you with the results. So that's why it takes time. Yeah, because of the options that you have. Watching this.